What's up, guys, and welcome to the final part of the TG Faction War, where today we go over the final standings of the tournament and do the grand finale. So without further ado, let's get into it, and these will be a bit more detailed than they have been for the previous few. In last place with a grand total of 0 wins, 0 match wins, is the Tribal Faction. Really, their only good unit is the Spear Thrower. And when it gets stomped on by a Mammoth, that's not very good. Their most expensive unit, the Mammoth, is by far one of the worst boss units in the game. It's actually probably the worst boss unit. For sure. In 39th place with 4 wins is the Farmer Faction. The Farmer Faction really only had one job to do, being protect the Scarecrow until the Scarecrow gets out enough birds to win any matchup, and they really didn't do that job well. Next up, 38th place is the Viking Faction, also with 4 wins. The Viking Faction is essentially an all melee faction. The Ice Archer in Faction v Faction tournament doesn't even count as a melee unit, as it doesn't do anything. As a ranged unit, as it doesn't do anything ever. And that is unfortunate. Your one ranged unit, it's not helpful in this tournament. In 37th place with 6 wins is the Holiday Faction. They have really just too few units in order to really make something happen here. Only 4 units is just not good. In 36th place with 6 wins as well, the Pirate Faction. This is the opposite problem to the Viking Faction in that they have too many ranged units. All of their weak units are ranged units, and then both of their biggest unit is a melee unit, and their second biggest unit is a mix of the two. The cannon is pretty alright. Pirate Queen, don't get me wrong, is actually a really strong unit from the base game, but just not strong enough to carry an entire faction. And finally, in 35th place, also with 6 wins, the Medieval Faction. The Medieval Faction was kind of created to work as a faction rather than be individuals. Which is why I expect that if we were to go back to like the start of the game and do this tournament, they would actually be able to win a lot of the time. The King is like pounds for pounds, like dollar for dollar, the strongest melee unit of the game. Base game only. Although it's been a while since I've done one of those tournaments. Anyway, the Catapult is good. The Archer is consistently amazing in the 1v1 league. But the Healer, I mean, it barely heals anything. The Knight is a huge waste of 650. It's actually a really bad unit. And, well, I mean, the Squire is a Squire. You can't expect much. And then the Bard, it does its job well. Next up, in 34th place with 7 wins, the Renaissance Faction. The Vinci Tank is not the greatest boss unit to have. And other than that, just, Jouster's decent. I mean, Balloon Archer's pretty good 1v1s in the 1v1 league, but your 1v1 league units have to be somewhat expensive. Because you can't just run into Faction v Faction with one of your good 1v1 league unit and expect to be able to win. Next up, also with 7 wins, the Spooky Faction. They actually kind of picked up a lot of traction. They used to be completely defeated. The Reaper is an amazing unit. I mean, it is just so fun to use, but against other units, specifically creating units or even just range units in general, it is super weak, so easy to kill. Pumpkin Catapult, if used correctly, is so superior to the Catapult, and I will always believe this because they do pretty much the same damage, have the same reload time and range. It's just the Pumpkin Catapult can hit multiple times, and that is really important. The Swordcaster also does really respectable DPS. 32nd place is also with also 7 wins, the Legacy Faction. The tank doesn't have enough health, the Super Boxer doesn't have enough health, Thor and Wizard are really the only two that are efficient here for a faction v faction league. Thor can deal out high damage, and so can the Wizard. That's nothing against all the other units that Legacy has, because they have a lot of them. A lot of them are really good, but just those 4 are the most important, and, well, Thor and the Wizard are kind of the ones doing the most work. 31st place, 11 wins this time. The Ancient Faction. The Ballista kinda single-handedly makes this faction actually good, being able to one-shot practically everything in the base game, and as so many of my created units just die to 1 or even 2 ballista shots. The Minotaur is pretty good. Snake Archer can cause some distractions for especially in a longer match. They'll cause even more distractions with more snakes, but that's kind of it. Shieldbearer, Sarissa, Hoplite don't really matter. Zeus can sometimes pull through and get something done, but most of the times his damage output is just pitiful. Wild West also has 30 wins. They are a heavily ranged-based faction. Gunslinger, great for crowds. Cactus is so defensive, so hard to kill. Deceivingly hard to kill. One of the hardest things to kill in the entire game. Lasso is weird, but Deadeye is just a worse ballista. Worse range, better reload, worse damage, and can be blocked by a whole lot more units. Quick Draw is, well, it's not the worst boss unit, but it's definitely not the best, as there's so many others that just wallop him. Getting into 12 wins, we have the Dynasty Faction. Dragon, Hwacha, and Monkey King are the 3 we need to look at. Dragon, so good against melee units and crowds. The Hwacha, amazing against single target. It's fine against crowds. And then the Monkey King jumps in and creates such a good distraction for them. That's why they've won, probably why they've won almost a third of the time. 3 of their 7 units are decent. The Light Faction also has 12 wins. Divine Arbiter, Sacred Elephant, and Chronomancer are the 3 we're looking at here. Chronomancer, time stop, time freeze, area of effect, but very weak against projectiles. Divine Arbiter, again, so strong, so ridiculously strong with those orbs. They do such a rude amount of damage. But just he has too weak of a projectile, or I mean too weak of a health pool. Sacred Elephant also really strong, but just the rider is the important part, and he's very weak. Next up, 27th place, the Dark Faction at 14 wins. Tempest Lich and Void Monarch are the 2 we need to look at here. Void Monarch is amazing. Just so good to dodge and being able to do such high melee damage. The Tempest Lich, so good against crowds, prolonged periods of attack and such. The Historical Faction is up next. The Riot Police and Queen are the most important units. Both of them are really good in 1v1 League. In fact, Riot Police is, I believe, number 4, or he's top 5 in the 1v1 League, which is wild to me. Just the rest of the units can't really do much. Gladiator can sometimes kill something if he gets a good kickoff, but most of the time it doesn't happen. Souls also have 25 wins. Most of them only have 1 ability. Some of them even have none. And in a tournament like this, the more abilities you have in your faction, as we'll see, and also the better those abilities are, the better your faction does overall. And then also at 14 wins is Undertale. This is also one of those scenarios. Very few of them actually have abilities that could be easily replicated in tabs. In fact, Sans had the most impressive abilities, but he has only 1 HP, so anything that hits him, and there are a lot of things that can hit him, Pharaoh Neil, Thor Lightning, Gunslinger Barrage, Rocket Rain, Arrow Rain, Divine Arbiter Orbs, Sword Casting, just to name 7 of the things that can hit him. It's just not good enough. It was good enough to get them 14 wins, with Azrael Dreamer being like a top 10 unit, Metaton Neo having Crows, which do really good amount of damage, and Red having Hurricane Slash. That's probably what's bringing them so much success. The Secret Faction is up next with 50. There's so many of them. It actually kind of started to hurt placing all of these units down, but anyway. The Secret Faction, with all of it has just a massive array of units. Just so hard to truly counter them all. I mean, you get something that's good against crowd, and you'll counter, the vast majority of them. You get something that's good against 1v1s, you can counter the bigger boys. Gatling Gun, when it gets up to speed, it's so hard to stop, especially when you have the 4 giants with their absolutely huge HP pools coming at you. Ice Giant has like 16,000 HP. He takes like 8 ballista shots. Undying Dying takes 12 to kill. And then the rest of them also have very respectable HP pools. You have some smaller units as well, like the Necromancer, Cupid, Blackbeard, Shogun Sensei, that can also like do so much to harm you. With 16 wins is Anime. They have a lot of DPS here, with Nezuko, Sebastian, and Itachi there in the background, having fire, and birds. The rest of them, it's kind of meh, honestly. Yeah, this is what it looks like for me placing them all down. In 21st place, 17 wins, Ultra Cabin. They have 4 units. That's kind of just enough to state why they're in the bottom half, but just barely in the bottom half, as Javen and Giflet are both pretty solid. Luke is alright, and Interest just sucks. But you have 2 good units, 1 unit that's alright, and 1 bad unit, but you only have 4 units. It's just not enough units. DDFC ended up with 18 wins throughout the entire tournament. You'll see later that I've actually kind of tiered units. I didn't do that here. But obviously Yato was very important with all of his abilities, and that's kind of it. No one else on this faction really had abilities. Like, a lot of abilities. Some of them did. Eevee had some. Corbin had a few. And, well, that's kind of just it. Pop Culture is next up with 19 wins. Darth Vader is amazing at 1v1s, and Emperor Palpatine can also hold his own. Luke and Yoda are kind of just there, and Steven Universe can actually dish out a surprising amount of damage. Elements has 20 wins in 18th place. They don't really have many abilities, but the ones they have they make great use of. Lava Lord has a lot of DPS when the Warlord can dish out a high amount of damage. Ice King can keep units back for a long time, and Thunderzar can do great against crowds, and well, so can Lava Lord. Also, if anything seems laggy, it's because there are like 140 plus units on the screen later on down the road. AU is when I actually started to kind of separate the ones that did really well from the rest of the pack. Undertale AUs gained 23 wins, and also 1 tie, which is important to mention. There are a few ties here that are really just because it could have gone either way. I couldn't actually really decide which way I wanted it to go, but so Ink Sand, Story Shift Kara, and Cross Kara are the 3 most important ones to talk about. Everyone else is either not important or not important enough. Ink Sands has a really high HP pool, and he kind of just sticks around until the end. He's usually the last one to die. Story Shift Kara can dish out some respectable DPS with sword casting, and was actually at one point the best unit for the faction. We'll see how that changes going into our like whittling down faction tournaments. And then Cross Kara with Hurricane slash and Void Monarch Dodge was just instrumental to so many wins of the AU's faction. 16th place, by the way. We have other games. The top tier of them, Sakia, Asha, Goddess, and Fish. Paint the Town Red and Dust are secondary tier, and then everyone else is third tier. Other games also has 23 wins, but also has the most amount of ties. I'm pretty sure every tie in the game, well, they have 4 ties, and there's like only 10 ties, I think, 5 ties that happened here. 6 maybe. So, Sakia, really impressive DPS. Asha is kind of just crosshair, and I'm surprised that I never did that 1v1, and I'll have to do that 1v1 sometime. Goddess of Explosions can dish out some really nice damage with Dragon Punch and Dragon Kick. And Fish can just kind of wall up most things that he comes across. Dust has a high HP pool, and Painted Town Red has some really good abilities. Next up, 25 wins, Deltarune. No one really stood out to me except for Spamton Neo and Giga Queen, but I can't have big units up in the front because they would just kind of obstruct our view of the rest of the faction. Noelle actually surprised me. She was decently good. Birdly also surprised me for being good. Task Manager I thought was going to be pretty good, and was not surprised when she ended up being pretty good. The Infernal Whip can dish out some damage, and Crows are just big. Spamton Normal, however, was very surprising with the amount of knockback he has. And then both Giga Queen and Spamton Neo have like Rocket Rain and a bunch of other abilities that just makes them really strong. In 14th place, with 26 wins, Undertale crossover. Steve and Danielle being the primary ones, and Skelly, Chasm, and Isaac being our secondary ones. I mean, of course, they did have the king of the 1v1 league, Skelly, on their side, but just, again, like with the Medieval Faction, who has good melee and ranged 1v1 league units, when you bring them into a faction, you have to hope that you get one of them, or very few of them, because if they're a cheap unit like this, you only get one. And then they have to go up against like an entire other faction. And this one cheap unit can't really do that. Or I guess I should have said, you need to hope that they're expensive. Which, for the most part, my 1v1, the good 1v1 league units are really not that expensive. Danielle was instrumental to many wins that the faction gained with Hurricane Slash and a Divine Arbiter projectile to just dish out immense amounts of damage to almost any target she comes across. Steven within range has always been such a solid unit, and then both Chasm and Isaac have really respectable DPS. Next up, with 27 wins in 13th place, Gaming Server. There's just a lot to talk about here. There's so many units, a lot of them have good abilities, and a lot of them have really good, respectable DPS, and that's kind of why they have gotten so far. Now, a faction that has dropped off, they used to be undefeated, but they aren't anymore. In 12th place, Team Fortress 2. And really the reason why, they don't really have any abilities. Pyro is the only one to have like more than one ability. They just kind of have really good weaponry. Pyro with Fireball, Heavy with the minigun to blast them back, Engineer can summon one unit. Soldier can actually outrun most units walking backwards, and then kind of shoot them down with the rocket launcher, and then Demo Knight has the big sword to kind of cleave things up with. So, I mean, half of the team is pretty good, and the other half is kind of not. And then next up, In 11th place is RLS with 29 wins. Blade alone can solo a lot of things. And then Demon Horror has just a huge HP pool. Demon Horror Phase 2, that is. Suki with the Hurricane Slash is a very strong unit, and Plasma Sands with Lightning is also very, very strong. Next up, in 10th place, the 10th best faction, Friday Night Funkin'. Both Sarvents have Divine Arbiter Orbs. Tricky is a really well-created unit. Garcello with Fire Breath keeps them back. Tabby and Witty both kind of just go in when they need to and just blow everything up. Senpai does a great job of keeping units like preoccupied with each other. And Tankman can sometimes deal super high damage. And then a lot of units back here aren't pushovers either. Sky Manifest and Hex come to mind when speaking that. Old Cappy as well. Next up, 9th place, Saving Our Country. They have a lot of abilities and a pretty large HP pool. The Brute just kind of hits something and it dies. Firelord N is just so vicious, jumping all over the place, breathing fire on anything that dares move. Marissa can incapacitate some units, V can deal some high damage, and so can Overseer. And then back there, Obsessed didn't really get to show her strength. She can overwhelm units like very, very fast. And then really the only bad unit I would have to say is probably Ivan. Really expensive, really tanky, but Ice is just not good. In 8th place is the Animals faction, and Bird God and Commander Cluck should have been in front, but I just didn't feel like it because it was a small faction. I could just put them back there. Anyway, the Animals faction. Bird God has such an amazing strategy for fighting against pretty much any unit in the game. Throw out the birds, which can be killed easily, but then you disable them from attacking with your ability. It's not like you have to give up your weapon slot to do it with Cupid Arrow. You just make them unable to attack and then spam them with birds. And they have 32 wins. I don't know if I pointed that out yet. In 7th place with 32 wins as well is Evertail. There are so many of them. It's the most expensive faction we have here by like 13,000. And they have just such a huge amount of HP for any person to try and get through. It's not really all that feasible to actually be able to kill all of Evertail at once. Then you have units like Bahamut who are actually like good instead of Siren Head. 177 units. Great. In 6th place with an impressive 33 wins, Neo Undertale crossover. They have a lot of love arrows, Cupid arrows, that kind of just incapacitate so many units. Zaren's no pushover, Elise is pretty good, C is pretty good, and Susie's Phase 2 is pretty good. Damie Phase 2, Susie Phase 1, Brendan and Zach are kind of secondary units there. It's a very expensive faction and can actually back up its cost with multiple good units, which is something that a lot of factions can't say they have. They have 7 amazing units. That's more than some factions have units in total. Next up, in 5th place with an impressive record of 34 wins, 5 losses, 0 ties, the Keepers Rise. And I don't even know where to start, really. I mean, A, they're a very expensive faction. I think one of our top 5 most expensive factions. B, they do have a very cheap unit with Divine Arbiter Orbs and another unit with Divine Arbiter Orbs. 3, there's just so many units here on the screen. There's so many of them. And they all have really good weaponry. Like there's a lot of fire back there. A lot of fire. There's a lot of Aegis Shield, which is a really good ability. And just, they are good in general. I don't really have much else to say. I don't really know these units much. In fourth place with 35 wins, My Hero Academia. All for one solos so many things. Even when he's dead, his body just kind of becomes a zone of control. If you walk towards this place, you get impaled. All Might, Bakugo, and Izuku can dish out some really high damage, and Shoto is really good at keeping enemies back. And now, let's get on to our top 3. In third place with 35 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie, the Ultimate Faction. If you really need me to explain why, 1, their name, 2, they are made to be good, like really good. They are made to be the best unit for each of their respective factions. 3, they all have just a huge array of weapons and abilities. And in this tournament, having abilities, good ones, and good weapons is so important to success. So stuff like Light Ultimate and Wild West and Farmer Ultimate, who can all dish out stupidly high DPS for a single target, are really good. And then Evil Ultimate just teleports to the back and then starts taking lives left and right from almost everything he wants. In second place is Miscellaneous. So Satan kinda solos most things. He has a much higher HP pool than All For One, and unlike All For One, he can make up the distance multiple times instantly. Melee Master, also with just the huge amounts of DPS he deals, is very impressive as well of a unit. And that, of course, leaves Miscellaneous 2 as the number 1 faction, having gone undefeated for the entire tournament. And just where do I start with them? Well, let's start with that. There are a whole bunch of units here that hit really hard. Charlie, Chase, Cade, all have Hurricane / Poe has the Ice Giant Punch. Fox has so many potions to throw, and Pauline can just overwhelm with a whole bunch of units. It's really just the 6 out here in front that deserve this undefeated win. But are they truly the best faction? We have left this faction out of the tournaments for too long. And I mean, also, we left the Brawl Stars faction out of this one because it was way too boring. Oh my god, that would have been so boring. I would have wanted to die every time. Anyway, there is one faction who has something to say about Miscellaneous 2 going undefeated. That's right. The Jokes faction is here to put an end to Miscellaneous 2. Now then, which one do we start with? I guess we just go with the cheapest one first, the Minigun Ballista, and see if they can actually win. Oh, they're actually gonna lose. I mean, fair. They are only 250, and it was only 6,000 worth. But just everything that they wanted to hit died immediately. So down goes the Minigun Ballista. However, he calls in he calls in the Speedster, but we can't have that. So instead, he calls in the Absolute Giant, but we can't have that either, because that is way too big. So who is actually up next? So we got 250, 3,600, 30. I think Gun Guy is up next. Begin. I mean, again, I don't give my joke units like 1000 million HP. So Miscellaneous 2 might do this one as well. Take out 2 joke units, which would be insane to do. And they did it. They did indeed take out 2 joke units. But I think their luck is about to end. For now, they have incurred the wrath of quite possibly one of my strongest units ever. Sensei Ion Strike. Begin. I mean, they're gonna kill some of them, because again, Sensei Ion Strike. He doesn't have a high HP. Okay. Oh my god, dude. So that's that down. Ultimate Swordmaster. How about you come get a taste? I wonder if they'll even need to get it. Oh, speak of the devil, one of them did. Leave a comment on this video telling me if you'd like to see some of the joke units participate in actual tournaments, because I would love to start having some of my cheaper joke units participate in tournaments, even if it was just Thug Finals. That would be great. But the last one falls. So from that we go on to Archer God, who very much so might lose. They aren't that impressive, honestly. Yep. Ooh, and now we get into some of the fun ones. The True Bird God. Is he okay? Oh my god, that's so many birds! Oh my god! That's so many birds! Again, he might just die because it's only one. Hurricane Slash is, again, pretty powerful. I was gonna try and take control of him. Bad idea, bad idea. Wow, he actually lost that one. Alright, fair enough. Oh, I forgot Sarvent Demon Form. Oh, I think it was good that I forgot Sarvent Demon Form. This is the pre-nerf version. This is, I think, before I banned self-copy. Yes, this is 100% before I banned self-copy. I mean, honestly, they are still doing really well. Miscellaneous 2 is. They took them all down to like half health. So, who's next from that? Susie? I think it's Susie. Oh, my frames have very quickly died. Ow. Ow. And then True Me. I mean, that Hurricane Slash that Hurricane Slash seems like it actually just spawned more Miis. Oh my lord. Oh, the game is crying. So, this is awkward. The game crashed as I tried to end the match up against True Skilliness, so I'm pretty sure the Jokes faction won. But anyway, with that being said, I thank you all for watching, and of course, have a good day. Oh, and yeah, see you next time.